If you hear this, run. If you hear any variation of this, run. So after gathering that this was the man at my show last night, my friends and I started to connect the dots. And it turns out that this man was losing his mind, and the woman sitting next to him at the show was looking at him like, why is he finding this so hilarious? That was his wife. Sisters, and yes, you misters, welcome to another episode of Relation Sis, where we talk about not only relationships with others, but more importantly, relationships with ourselves. My name is Kara, and I am your Relation Sis. How are y'all enjoying the new shorter format? Your girl has been traveling, so she's been trying to record episodes in between, and this podcast is a lot of work, a lot of moving parts, but consistency is important. So your girl is hustling and doing the thing. So yes, the shorter format is a temporary stay. I hope to do more long form content in the future, but for the month of May, girl, it's been a whirlwind. I've just been trying to knock out these episodes like boom, 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 boom. Personally, when I listen to podcast episodes, I listen to everything in 1.5 time and double time. So 15 minutes really amounts to 7.5 minutes. But some of y'all listen to it in its entirety in regular time, which power to y'all. I personally could never. I don't have that attention span. So kudos to y'all who listen to it in regular time. But yes, the longer form episodes with guests, I promise will be back. I just came back from a Vegas trip, and I'm going to San Diego for a bachelorette, and then coming back for 2 days, and then I'm off to Hawaii for a wedding. Yes, lots of weddings this year. Love is in the air. But first, my trip to Las Vegas. Vegas to me is such an interesting place. Like, I love the grandeur. I like the opulence. Opulence! You own everything. Sorry, I had to do it. Vegas is like a smorgasbord of all the worst parts of our world and our culture. Yes, you have luxury, but it's also abundance. And consumption means something else other than just a disease, right? I'm rolling with it. It's excess. It's flaunting your wealth. But it's also a very seedy place. Obviously, there's a really big gambling culture, party culture, drugs. So with all the glitz and glamour of Vegas, there's also a darkness to it. So inspired by my experiences in Vegas, this episode is the one with the red flags. But first of all, I'm going to tell y'all a story. So once upon a time, I used to be a comedian. Yes, I was living my best Ali Wong fantasy. I wanted to be a stand-up comic. I wanted to tell my story. I wanted to tell jokes to massive audiences. As I learned very quickly, comedy is hard. It's a lot of people telling you that you suck. It's one of the few things that people can tell you that you suck at in life. It's a lot of dealing with strangers, performing for crowds that may or may not care about anything you're saying or even care for you as a person. And so I was competing one time for a comedy contest, which I ended up placing first in, by the way. But I was performing my set, and there was a man at the front of the audience who was just full-on guffawing, losing his absolute mind listening to my set. Like, he was louder than everyone his voice carried, which, good for me, right? I'm a comedian. I'm good at what I do. The next day, I get a message to my Facebook page. So I open the message. It's the man from the show. He messages me and says, hey, like, your set was amazing. And then he says, if I wasn't married, you would totally be my type. And here we go with the red flags. First of all, sir, just because you preface something doesn't mean that you're still saying what you're saying. If I wasn't married, I would totally be hitting on you. Like, say less. You're hitting on me. If I wasn't engaged, you would totally be my type. Okay, again, with the preface. No, you're still saying what you're trying not to say. Just because you preface it does not negate what you are inadvertently communicating. If you hear this, run. If you hear any variation of this, run. So after gathering that this was the man at my show last night, my friends and I started to connect the dots. And it turns out that this man was losing his mind, and the woman sitting next to him at the show was looking at him like, what the fuck is this guy on about? Like, why is he finding this so hilarious? That was his wife, not realizing that maybe her husband was having a moment, a spiritual moment, sexual moment, just, I don't know. But he was going through an experience. I would love to say that this is the first time that anything like this has ever happened before, but honestly, it's not, and it won't be the last. As a trans woman who has been sexualized and fetishized, I have witnessed a lot of darkness when it comes to the dating world. Just listen to some of my other episodes. The darkness is there. And I wish I could say I'm surprised, but this isn't my first rodeo. Look at Grindr. And I know I harp on Grindr a lot, but on Grindr, there are full tribes dedicated to being discreet, being on a down low. There's a literal category for people who are married. So this doesn't surprise me. And it's listening to the stories of my girlfriends who are at a club and they're not trying to attract any attention and men are still hitting on them and they're like, oh, I have a boyfriend, just to get them off their backs. And then these men showing off their wedding rings like, so what, I have a wife at home. It's moments like those that sober me up to what is really out there in the world. But at the same time, I'm not embittered by these experiences because otherwise I wouldn't be in this industry. I think that if you believe that people of a certain gender, for example, are trash, you will attract trash. It's the law of attraction. You attract what you believe. And so if you believe that there are no good people out there and that it's just a sea of shit, that is what you will attract. And that is all you will see in the world. The reason why I tell the story of the man at the comedy show is not to say, oh yeah, Kara's hot shit and she can get it. No. My whole point in all of this is that people are telling you who they are if you would just listen. And when they tell you who they are, believe them. If someone's telling you, if I didn't have a girlfriend, I would totally be hitting on you right now, run. That's not a compliment. Someone's telling you, if I wasn't married, you'd totally be my type. Or if I wasn't engaged, we would have totally had sex that night. Run! When I think about these moments, I think about their partners. This is somebody's husband. This is somebody's fiance. There's a part of me that wonders, where do you think your man goes until 4 a.m? And again, that's not to say blame the victim. But it's always those people that are like, oh no, I got my man on lock. I got them down pat. Like, my man would never pull anything like that. And I have just seen overwhelming evidence, time and time again, of people stepping outside their relationships, which is why I place such a heavy emphasis on not filling in the blanks for someone instead of letting them fill in their own blanks. Don't make assumptions about people. Let them speak for themselves. And when they tell you who they are, believe them. In last week's episode, we talked about values, preferences, standards, and deal breakers. And when we were examining our standards and our deal breakers, we were asking ourselves the questions, what could I tolerate? What would I not stand for? Not only do we need to be asking ourselves the right questions, we need to be asking our prospective partners the right questions as well. I'm a trans woman, and that makes dating for me a little different than others. I know that there's a large population of people who are attracted to trans women, who have had sex with a trans woman, maybe even dated a trans woman, that would never voluntarily share that information with people that they date. There are people who have cheated on their partners in the past that would not voluntarily share that information unless prompted. And so those questions that you're afraid to ask, or those questions that you assume you know the answer to, ask those questions. Again, in the early stages of dating, you have rose-tinted goggles on. You're so enamored and you think the best about this person. And then you find something out that just completely shatters your perception. It's like you're in the Matrix and all of a sudden you're seeing the world for what it is, or you're seeing the person for who they are. You're like, whoa, I'm learning something new about this person, or I'm seeing a different side about this person. I don't know how I feel about that. That's why it's important to ask those questions. And sometimes you don't even have to dig for those questions. Maybe you're dating someone who hasn't had the best dating track record. Look, we all have a past. We've all done things that we're not proud of. But there are people who are so brazen with their red flag behavior and talk about it openly as if it's a non-issue. Maybe you're dating someone who has openly admitted that they struggle with staying faithful in their relationships. Story for another day, but I've dated someone whose past 5 relationships ended because of his addiction. The first episode of this podcast, I talked about my relationship with the 38-year-old who was an avoidant and ultimately couldn't see a future with any girl that he dated in the past 5 years. And these flags that I'm talking about don't necessarily have to be damning. Again, I'm not saying that people can't change, but if there's a pattern of behavior that's not being addressed, or people being disillusioned from the fact that these are in fact red flag behaviors, that's a problem. If you're in the early stages of dating and someone is already self-proclaiming themselves to be emotionally unavailable, or their past relationships have all ended because they're struggling with their mental health, or maybe they have anger issues, again, if someone is telling you who they are, believe them. Don't be a Captain Save a Hoe. In the most recent season of Love is Blind, AD dated a playboy, and she got burned really badly. Clay was someone who had not dealt with his childhood trauma. He grew up with his dad, who constantly cheated on his mother unbeknownst to her, and because of that had a deep-seated fear in whether or not he would be able to commit to anyone. And this was something that he openly shared with her. But people who are save-a-hoes, we're nurturing. We think, oh, I can save this person. Oh, I can help this person. I'm going to be so good for them. I'm going to be the one that can change them. I'm going to do what no other person could do before. But don't waste your time trying to make someone better for someone else. Don't go and convince yourself that you're going to save this person, because it's not your job to save them from themselves. Don't be afraid of losing a person. Be afraid of losing time. Don't let yourself be a ritual sacrifice. Think about how hard it is to change yourself, then think about how hard it is to change someone else. And again, that's not to say that people can't change. I wouldn't be in this industry if I didn't believe that. People can change. People can change if they want to. But in an interim, if someone's a chronic cheater, if someone's addiction is getting in the way of their past 5 relationships, if someone's chronically emotionally unavailable, or really struggling with their mental health, or has deep-seated anger issues, again, with someone who's exhibiting red flag behaviors, that's not to say that we have to demonize them for things that they're trying to work through. But if you're sticking around for someone who's exhibiting red flag behaviors, are you seeing them take tangible steps towards bettering themselves? Are they even at that point where they can see that their behaviors are in fact red flags and that they want to better themselves? You can't date someone for the person that they could be one day. You have to date them for the person that they are today. In last week's episode, we talked about our motivations for dating. Why do you want to be in a relationship? Why do you want to date? Again, your reasons are your reasons, but there are good reasons and there are not so good reasons. If you are a serial monogamist because you can't stand the idea of being by yourself, or because you don't want to be alone, or because you hate your own company, that's not a good reason. If you're expecting someone to save you from your situation or save you from yourself, again, not a good reason. If you're wanting someone to look at you with those eyes of adoration to boost your self-esteem, again, not a good reason. So for people who are exhibiting red flag behavior, it begs the question of why do they want to date? Why now? Have they worked through their ish? Or are they expecting someone to save them? Or someone to tolerate it until they reach a breaking point? And are you going to waste your life trying to chase after someone who ultimately can't give you what you want? It's an oldie but a goodie. If you can't love yourself, how in the hell you gonna love somebody else? Can I get an amen? We keep things real here on Relation Sis with full frontal honesty. I have friends who are like, I promise I'm going to catch up on all the episodes. It means the world to me. We are over 250 downloads total for Relation Sis, which is insane. Let me know what y'all think about the new format. Do we like the shorter episodes? Do we want more long form content? Do we want more guests? Do we want Andy as a permanent co-host? Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Relation Sis. My name is Cara, and remember, somebody loves you. You. Bye!